Jonah Coleman is a top 3 running back in college football.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Lars, we got a really fun show coming out all the everydayers today, but just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell down below so you don't miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as all that really does help the channel out a lot. Now, we got a really fun show, like I said, and we're really excited about this. We want to talk about some of the injured players that Jedd Fisch mentioned might be close to returning. Omari Evans, Jayvon Parker, a couple of guys in that mold who might be able to help the team out this week and in the coming weeks for sure. We want to talk about some strong, under-the-radar performers who maybe haven't gotten as much love as they should from a really strong opening game against Colorado State, but nobody had a stronger week than Jonah Coleman, who's named co-Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week, along with Jade Mayava from USC, after rushing for 177 yards, 22 more through the air, and a couple of kick returns yards as well. Lars, is top 3 underselling Jonah?
Well, statistically, he's top 2, and you could argue not 2, depending on if you count UNLV playing in 2 games. The thing about Jonah, looking back at that Colorado State game, was just how there was so much conviction in his game that we saw a hint of last season, but last night seemed to be a different, gear, if you will, where Jonah, when he hit that 26-yarder, when he hit the 38-yarder in the fourth quarter, there was a different level of determination in those. And as I pointed out in the story on Huskies, where I think he was 149 yards after contact, which is the most among any running back in a single game this season. Obviously, I forgot his name, but the UNLV running back has a 217, but he's played in 2 games. So the reason why you put Jonah in that top 2 and not 2 for me is 1 game. It's all you needed to see. Jonah is one of the best backs in the country, if not the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things where when you said hit a different gear, I thought you were actually going to take that in a different direction, because that was one thing that he was asked about a little bit after the game. Obviously, it's been a point of discussion on the show is how much he changed his body over the course of the offseason. And that was one thing that honestly, if there was anything that really we didn't get to take a good look at during spring and fall camp, it was what Jonah looked like, because the few carries that he got, obviously to keep him fresh, there's no reason to give him all these kinds of reps when you know exactly what he's going to bring to the table. We were a little curious. It was, okay, we know that obviously we think he's going to get more explosive, faster, all these different things by changing his body in the way that he did. And that was one thing that really stood out to me from the press box while watching him, was the fact that when he hit the holes, his burst, his explosiveness was so much better than when you go back and you watch some of those, highlight reels from his junior tape as well, where, yeah, he was still a really, really good back last season, but it's obviously just a different form of him. And shout out to his pass blocking as well, while we're just on the topic of changing his body and getting stronger, different things like that. There was one play where he just picked up the linebacker coming off the edge and just put him in the ground on just while serving in pass protection. And that's one of the things that's really exciting to me as well, is having a guy who can do that just on top of everything he's going to give you with the ball in his hands. Just couldn't make me more excited about his future.
I mean, we talked about that with Jake Butt last season, where I think, again, that's where the strength comes into play, where you look at Jonah getting, leaner but stronger. It's not losing weight. It's gaining the right type of weight. You're gaining muscle mass. So you can pick up those blocks. And it's, to your point, something you said after the game, where playing in the Big Ten, on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, they know we're going to run the ball. We got to win those matchups. We got to win those one-on-ones. And we have to run the ball. Is, the only clean way I can put that there, because he threw a couple of expletives in there, as he, can tend to do. We love Jonah for it. But in saying all that, that's kind of what he showed, where he came back for a reason. He knew that Washington was going to be good last season, but it wasn't going to be what he fully should have deserved if he was going to go on to the NFL after last season. So he comes back. And I think this is the type of year where I say it all the time. He's the heartbeat of the team. And, it's crazy to me when you go back and look at the game. I'm gonna run through some stats of the year, because I wrote down. So Jonah Coleman, I believe, had 10 or 11 first downs, just in terms of total 10, first downs, of the 26 years I've had. Do you know how many were 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1?
2?
I believe it's 4. Yeah, 4.
It's 4.
Yeah, so he had a 3rd and 1 twice in the 4th quarter. He had a 3rd and 1 in the 3rd quarter, and he had
the catch in the 1st quarter.
Exactly. And you go now, the catch is kind of the anomaly there because it wasn't as a rush. But as I asked Jedd Fisch after the game about it, it was, well, we kind of knew what we had to do there. And Jedd did kind of acknowledge we were always going to go for that. There was never a question of should we punt, should we try and send out Ethan for this long one. And I think that speaks to why Jonah is the heartbeat of the team, where Jonah is going to find some way and Damon's going to do just enough. He's got to sneak it around or do what he has to do. And Jonah's going to get open. And we kind of just saw that was the play that really set the tone for Jonah in the offense Saturday night.
So one other thing that I want to mention and just kind of tie it into why it makes us so excited for the way the rest of the season can play out is because, well, having a weapon like that is so much fun. But I'm glad you referenced these short yardage scenarios because one thing that really stood out to me was, you and I have talked about this a lot, and it's something that Jedd Fisch mentioned during his press conference today, is how happy he was with the offensive line play, how much better that unit looked, especially on the ground. And one thing that Jonah has always done really well, that was certainly on full display on Saturday, was just finding ways to weave through the trees and weave through all the traffic in the middle of the line of scrimmage. And last year, he was asked to do so much because the offensive line wasn't able to clear away holes for him. And now, as he's, still running behind his blockers and getting into the second level, there are times where it just seems like he's just completely enclosed around 3, 4, 5 guys. And he does such a good job of just bouncing outside and cuts and some of the different moves that he has in his bag to get around blockers seemingly untouched, where, obviously you mentioned his yards after contact numbers, but just with a guy like that, with his frame and the way he's built, the contact balance that he shows, the way that it just seems like he's barely ever getting touched, just makes him such a valuable weapon for the rest of the season because, there are going to be some really talented defenses that you run into, especially when you think about Ohio State and what that's going to look like. But having a guy like this, it's what also just makes Damon Williams such a valuable piece of this offense because it's something, again, you and I have just discussed ad nauseum throughout the offseason of when they run some of these zone read plays. And it's Jonah Coleman and Damon Williams. That is so hard to stop unless you're committing like a third and sometimes even a fourth guy to that play, because with Jonah's increased speed, he can get outside the tackle box now if need be. We know what kind of speed Damon brings to the table. Then all of a sudden, with how creative Jedd can get with some of these different play calls, if he's running a zone read, okay, yeah, let's just make it an RPO and we can have somebody run a slant route over the middle of the field, just right into Damon's line of vision. There are so many different things that you can do off of that. And with what Jonah showed in game one, I feel like we're going to see, especially a team like UC Davis this weekend, come out and try to stack the box against him, which is just going to open up so many lanes in the passing game.
And I think, because you're not wrong about that, especially with the UC Davis point, but it makes me go back to I don't know if you got a chance to see the run direction that PFF had on their breakdowns.
I did.
I believe it was over 15 of his 24 carries were either between the center and right guard or on the right side of the line, if you will, just kind of in general, which speaks to who's over there. Landon Hatchett, a guy that we've been talking about who doesn't get enough credit across the country. He had a very good game in his own right. Drew has a party at right tackle. And then Gieran Hatchett, you had the Gieran Hatchett Champ Talila discussion where I think Gieran certainly played well enough in the first, opener game that coming back and getting adjusted to things. You wonder when Champ might break through there. But either way, like you look at that, like running behind Landon, running behind Drew. I mean, Drew has a party, deserves his flowers, and I know you gave him plenty of them on today's show. But with, it kind of just brings true, like you have one of the great backs, and now he finally has just enough in front of him to, make those find those holes, find those creases, because Jonah's got the vision. He's got that Myles Gaskin ability to see, hit the brakes, and then go. But then he kind of can do a number of different things, be that pass pro guy where he's such a Swiss Army knife. If you can unlock Jonah's full potential, the talent potential in this offense is insane.
Absolutely. The high-end stars on this team are so exciting, which is another thing that you and I have been just getting the message out there all summer, that this trio of Damon, Jonah, and Denzel Boston is going to be one of the nation's best. And they showed you exactly why during the Colorado State game. But let's get to some under-the-radar guys like Jacob Lane, who also really did show up. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts for a project fast? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. We've also got a message from our friends over at Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pill that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment's right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockdownCollege and use code LockdownCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockdownCollege and use promo code LockdownCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted but to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. So, Lars, as we look at some of these under-the-radar guys, one guy who I know I highlighted a little bit on the post-game show because I was really impressed with him, 6 tackles, 2 for loss. I believe he had 3 or 4 stops, according to the PFF metrics, was Jacob Lane, somebody who Jedd Fisch shouted out during his Monday press conference, said that the coaching staff gave him a game ball for his first start as a Washington guy starting for UW, which is always awesome to see. And he's someone who the run defense as a whole was not pretty. There are certainly things that need to be improved on. I know that, Colorado State kind of abandoned the run in the second half, which certainly helped the defense out a little bit. But I look at a guy like Jacob Lane, and not only was I really impressed with what he brought to the table in terms of the effort and the ability to just get after the quarterback, there are a couple of plays where he just kind of went out wide and did a really nice job tracking the play down from behind and turning it into a stop, unsuccessful play where, it's a minimal gain of 1 or less, I believe is what the metric is. And those are things that as this defense continues to evolve and get settled in and get comfortable, I think are going to be a really big and important part of just this run defense continuing to improve.
It is the fact that you led that with Jacob Lane's first start really is surprising when you think about how long he's been in the program. And it kind of just hit me when you said that. I'm like, wow, Jacob actually is a junior. Because when we saw him as a freshman, we saw what the high end potential could be. And not saying I don't think he's truly reached the ceiling quite yet, but you can see where he's headed certainly this season. And it's a promising start, no doubt about it. I'm just curious, what more can he tap into? Because we saw him make a number of plays, but I still think when you look at having that edge opposite Zach Durfee, Jacob can certainly help in the run game. You want to see, the pass rush come through as well, especially in Big Ten play and things like that. But being able to have that guy that can play outside with the ability to kind of sneak inside, depending on what package you want to do, that might be that X factor that, guys that we talk about during the season. And one we might have missed a little bit, not because we truly missed him, but in the sense of it almost became like what we saw in fall camp. Thinking back on it now, it's like we kind of knew, we expected that from Jacob Lane. We expected him to find success, but the sustainability for me now is going to be the key with Jacob, because getting that first start is key, almost in a way like Denzel Boston. You had to wait his turn, both from Emerald Ridge. Now you're getting your chance to shine. If he can really start to stack 2 or 3 games, like that under the radar connotation with him might go away pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to use it here because I felt like, especially for our agenda purposes, talking about guys like Alex McLaughlin is what really stood out from the defense on Saturday. And yes, he did have 6 tackles. He was one of the leaders in that department. But I feel like in terms of how the rest of the defensive line looked, I don't think they played horribly. Truly, I look at it, and especially with the way Jedd Fisch talked about it, which is why I want to, mention Simone Pepa's name next here, is I think that they did a really good job holding their ground and doing their job. which is, especially in the run game, what they are asked to do. And then it's on the linebackers and the safeties to come downhill and make those tackles, which, for all our everydayers out there, that's what this Ryan Walters defensive scheme is going to ask you to do. It's why I thought that we're going to see 4 guys get to 70 something tackles, because there are going to be so many opportunities for linebackers and safeties to make one-on-one just plays in space, which Alex did really well, which Devin Bryant did really well. And I think that if you can continue to see somebody who can collapse the pocket from the interior like Simone Pepa and combine it with somebody who can give you some kind of pass rush, whether it's Zach Durfee, Jacob Lane, Isaiah Ward, whoever you want to say that it might be, then all of a sudden you're going to generate more of a pass rush. And one game in, are there questions? Are there things that this unit needs to work on? Yes, but again, it's why I want to talk about Simone Pepa here, because we saw him do those things that Jedd Fisch highlighted. He was immovable at the point of attack and created opportunities for his teammates to come in and make plays. And in the pass rush, there were a couple of plays where he just picked the center up and walked him back 3, 4, 5 yards. He didn't, get any credit for that in terms of in the box score, but when you go back and you watch the game he played, this is why they brought him here. And then if you combine him with some of the injured guys that we'll talk about a little bit later on, and all of a sudden all those guys are healthy and giving you more of a rotation at that spot, this defensive line is going to get better throughout the season.
And you hit the nail on the head right there. It's having the rotation where you talk about Alex McLaughlin at safety, Devin Bryant, Tariq Budal, linebacker, actually Alexander in there a little bit as well. We know kind of what that 4 deep looks like, respectively, the 4 guys we're talking about at safety and linebacker, respectively. But with the defensive line, you could have Simone Pepa play 10 snaps like you did against CSU, or 15 to 18, depending on the game and matchup and things like that, because you want to keep that fresh rotation in. And what we saw from him was a guy where, especially against Colorado State, you don't need to play him more than 10, 12 snaps, because, as you were saying, the moving the center back analogy, like, can you explain to me a plan in which he would not move anyone back and just, pick him up?
Right.
Like, I remember talking to him at that NIL event, back, I think in February, and I'm just looking at him and he's like, yeah, I'm having a kid like in June or July, which obviously, I think he's 2 or 3 months old now. And I'm like, yeah, when we say feed families, like, that man's going to feed his family on Saturdays and then potentially on Sundays as well. And you just look at, as long as his snap count, and I know this kind of sounds crazy, but can stay limited in that range,
sure,
and mix in the Elenius Davis of the world. Bryce Butler, I believe, got a decent amount of snaps against CSU as well. And then, like we'll talk about in the third segment, some injured guys coming back potentially. All of that factors into you building that depth, building that rotation, so you can have the consistent big guys in the back, call it 7, with linebackers and the defensive backs, that you don't really have to have a set 4 or 5 up front, because whatever rotation you're going to work with, there's still coverage on the back end to come down and make those plays in space.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing here. And it can just kind of translate into a conversation about Devin Bryant here before we move on too, because that's what this defensive line is supposed to do. It's supposed to create opportunities, which, again, if you didn't get a chance to go back and listen to Jedd Fisch's press conference, to all your dares out there, I highly recommend that you do, because that was the number one thing he talked about with defending the run. And again, there are still issues in terms of bouncing things outside and adjustments that can be made on the edges in order to funnel more things back into the middle of the field. But in terms of what the interior of the defensive line was asked to do against the run, they held their ground and they did their jobs. And then it's on everyone else to come in and make plays and hold them to a minimum. I know that in the second half, the Colorado State rushing attack was something like 1.6 yards per carry, which, again, after the first half, little shocked they abandoned that. But I feel like part of that might be able to be accredited to a Devin Bryant or an Alex McLaughlin. And I want to talk about Devin in particular here, because when you have these guys that can make one-on-one tackles in open space, not only does it just give your defense an extra edge that I feel like in previous seasons we haven't been able to say that nearly as much about this Washington team, especially during the DeBoer era in 22 and 23. And obviously, you look at that team, that's not where its bread was buttered, but having guys that can consistently make tackles in open space is such an important part of just limiting these yards after contact, like we see Jonah Coleman do, to tie everything together here, like we see him do so well. And that's why I feel like we saw a lot of questions about, hey, why is Devin Bryant listed as a starter? What has he done? What does this coaching staff see from him? This is the number one example. It's him as a tackler. And he is one of those guys who every single play is going to find a way to wrap up and get ball carriers down for a minimum.
He really is. And it's exactly kind of to tie everything together why you made the changes that you did. Jedd knew what he had to address from being in the Big Ten in year one. And from back to front, front to back, he did it. And some of the pieces were already on the roster, and you just kind of had to mix and match it. But I think that is the perfect problem to be in, because that's what this kind of non-conference, call it SEC slate, is for. You get some tune-up games, you find out which matchups you like, which guys. And as we'll talk about later on this week, UC Davis presents another unique challenge. Where are they world beaters? No, and that's no slight to them at all. But you look at what UW has up front, you're developing guys that could potentially be, 2-year starters, 3-year starters down the line.
So I really like where you're going with that. And speaking of guys that have been starters in the past, Jayvon Parker might be able to make an impact sooner than some people might think. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live action as the game unfolds. It makes every game even more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Thursdays, Sundays, Mondays, any day that there's football on, because I know I'll be watching. You should too. And FanDuel makes it so much fun. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time for this Saturday's game between Washington and UC Davis, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about this game for as low as $6. The app makes it super simple. You can even see the exact view from your seat before buying. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Lars, we got a little bit of an update on Jayvon Parker from Jedd Fisch today, who it was really interesting. Him, Deshawn Lynch, Logan Sagapolu, a couple guys who want to make sure that we have a discussion about here. They all were dressed in full pads, listed as out for the game this past weekend, but they went through warmups, which is a sign that they might not be too far off from returning to the field. We didn't get updates on the particulars of the injuries of Logan or Deshawn, or obviously we know what's going on with Jayvon, but we know that the three of them have not, or excuse me, two of the three, Logan has been, have not been cleared for contact yet in terms of Deshawn and Jayvon Parker. And when these guys come back, that adds so much to the run defense. We saw what Jayvon was able to do, especially against Rutgers before he got hurt last season. And Deshawn Lynch, too, having another 300-pound guy who can set the edge against the run is going to be really impactful in that department.
No doubt about either of those guys making an impact, but do they really factor in against UC Davis or Wazoo? I think maybe more so Wazoo.
It's a long-term thing more than a UC Davis conversation.
Exactly, but I think it's still worth mentioning for the UC Davis game, getting that rust off, getting a little bit of, it's kind of to tie this whole thing to Jedd Fisch's be a pro mindset here, the preseason. Get him a couple of snaps, get him, warmed up for the season coming along, but then really the game you care about most is on September 27th. That's the game that really, if you add those three guys back to that defensive line with, Durfee and Simone Pepa and the rest of the interior Thompson, the rest of those guys along the defensive line, that is a lot healthier and deeper room along the front, 5, 6, 7, call it, than it is right now. And I think that can't be forgotten when you talk about where this defense can still go, where I know a lot of social media reaction was, wow, that was, kind of rough. And yeah, it kind of was, but that was nowhere near everything that was in the cupboard. That was nowhere near what Ryan Walters would probably dial up, as the season goes along. But it was enough to, give the defense a test, show the guys where they need to improve, but also remind you, hey, when you get some of these guys back, like Armand Parker, what we saw from him in fall camp, that was promising. And then, again, to, tie it back to, well, has he done it on Saturdays? Not yet. But if he can tap into that potential and just be a contributor along the defensive line this year, that will be a significant step forward for UW again in that department that they did not have last season.
So I will say another guy who Jedd Fisch did mention was Omari Parker. It sounds like he might have been dealing with a minor injury over the final week or two of camp, but it sounds like he's cleared to come back, and he just didn't get into the game against Colorado State. I feel like we might see him take the first snaps of his college career against UC Davis this Saturday. So that's something to keep an eye out as well. And I'm glad you mentioned him, because that's just another piece to this puzzle where it's why we've stressed the importance of discussing all of these guys, not Ontario Thompson is going to be the breakout guy, or, so much is going to be on the shoulders of Tai Uyunglele or Simone Pepa or whoever on the interior. It's because everyone is going to play a factor. And that's when this defense is going to be at its best. When you have 6, 7, 8 guys that are all healthy in the mix and able to rotate and contribute. So just adding more talent, and especially probably the highest ceiling guy you have at that position in Jayvon Parker, whenever he might be able to come back, adding all of those guys back to the mix is going to do nothing but help you. And I'm excited about that, because I think it's still a little confusing for me personally, because I think about, Jayvon coming off the Achilles, and I certainly have my own concerns about that for him being, 315, 320 pounds and 9-10 months out it's 12. We're in September. This would be month 12. It's crazy how time goes. But I think that having him come back in a limited capacity would certainly be helpful for him in that department. And then just, it adds so many reinforcements to this group as a whole, because I feel like you can have a situation where it seems like they've bulked him up a little bit to play nose tackle, but we know how athletic he is and how well he moves. So you can have him on the field with a Simone Pepa or a Logan Sagapolo. We saw Linus Davis line up at nose tackle a little bit. There are so many different combinations that he in particular opens up for the rest of the interior of this defensive line. And it's just going to add so much more in terms of pressure and all of that in the pass game as well.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at, some of these guys have, still kind of worked in their roles, where we talk about Logan Sagapolo in that same breath of Simone Pepa, where we have seen them on the field a little bit together, but we haven't seen it a ton. How do those packages come together? And when you apply it to UC Davis, I don't know how much we're going to see that again, even if Logan does end up playing. But this is more of a general discussion, like you kind of hinted at. Get them loose, get them ready to go, so that when those Big Ten matchups do come, you're not talking about, oh, hey, he's still got to work himself back into game shape. That shouldn't be the case. Instead of, hey, when do we use him and how do we use him? Which is another guy that I know you did want to talk about a little bit, and if you want to talk about him now, we probably can. Was Zaydrius Rainey-Sale? Like, how does Zaydrius factor into this? Because I remember you asked Jedd before the Colorado State game, is Zaydrius and Jacob Manu in that same kind of boat? And Jedd's answer was yes, but in the way he said yes, it was sounding a little more optimistic to me, and a guy that if you can find a way to just sprinkle him in and get his college career going at some point this season, certainly I don't think it's going to be against UC Davis, but a guy that as we start to talk about this depth on defense and who's next behind Devin Bryant and Tariq, because Zaydrius, you mentioned the high ceiling, he might have the highest ceiling of guys on the defense, period.
I don't think I can disagree with that. I like where you're going with this, because there are so many different things that I think Jacob Manu adds from a sense of coming downhill and attacking blocks in the run game and what he can do to blow things up on the interior. But with Zaydrius, where I'm really interested in is I think his long-term future is going to be very similar to whatever role we see X-Ray Alexander play this year, where walking between inside and outside linebacker. But my question is, if we do see, let's just say he burns his red shirt this year. Jedd Fisch mentioned 5 guys that would probably wind up burning their red shirt. The 5 guys who played snaps on both offense, in the 2 deeps, I would say is the best way to put it, with John Mills, Raiden Vinesbright, Desmond Roebuck, Devin Hyde, and John Mills were the guys that he mentioned. But then on top of that, Dylan Robinson and Ryland Hiller played in the game as well. So again, the 6.5 line that we set in terms of freshmen burning their red shirt was right on there. Good for us. But adding Zaydrius to this mix, and the reason I mention it this way is adding Zaydrius to this mix can give you so much of a boost of speed and a little bit of power too at this point in his career. I mean, I know coming off the ACL might look a little different right now on the outside. And I saw a lot of people asking, where is this pass rush going to come from the outside? Because Zach Durfee dropped into coverage a decent amount in this opening game. I'm not sure how much that's going to continue going forward. I just feel like you're going to want to use him in different roles. But I feel like Zaydrius is the kind of guy who, if you get into some of these 3rd and long scenarios and he is cleared and he is healthy, why not throw him out there? Because that's one of the things that they're doing with Devin Hyde right now. Is this guy is an upside with strength and speed and power, and you love the athleticism that he brings to the table. So I feel like this coaching staff's viewpoint with that right now is let's let him develop on the fly a little bit and develop by just getting into these games early instead of, holding him out for a year and giving more snaps to Isaiah Ward, or who they might not necessarily trust as much as a run defender at this point in time, or obviously with Deshawn Lynch, and Hayden Moore didn't get in the game either. So there are still different things to do there. And just again, in that same light of Devin, why not throw him into the game with Zaydrius and let him develop on the fly and let him just get a couple of these reps under his belt and see if he can just be that disruptor that he has been throughout his high school career.
It's like when you get a new tool and you just want to take it home and just start using it a little bit, just kind of, try it out, see how you see how it feels, see how it cuts, see how it does certain things, because you're probably not going to need it right away. This season, obviously, you're pretty set, but maybe on special teams, maybe you sprinkle in him just in a way to where he's able to get comfortable with the speed of college football. Not in a way like Damon last season, because Damon, to an extent, Adam Muhammad also played 13 games last season, way more than Zaydrius is going to play this season. Obviously, that goes without saying. But you talk about guys that Audrey Harris played in 7 games. I'm not sure Zaydrius is going to find 7, but if he finds 4, 5, and then if you make a bowl game, we'll see where it goes from there. But that's what you're kind of looking for, where tap into that now, get a sense of what it is. And to tie this full circle, you mentioned a guy that dropped back in coverage. PFF had Jacob Lane as the highest graded guy in coverage off the edge. Think about that. Like that in this Ryan Walters defense, there's so many different things you're looking for. So just getting guys the opportunity and experience will be invaluable this season for Zaydrius.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of guys getting experience, that's why I wanted to highlight Desmond Roebuck and Raiden Vines right there for a second as well, because Omari Evans is another guy who was dealing with an injury. We didn't see him suit up or play against Colorado State. Jedd Fisch said it was a soft tissue thing, and they're expecting him to play this week. So just another thing to keep an eye on. I know some everydayers had questions about that, so I wanted to touch on that before we get out of here. But with Lars, with that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.